You know that classic image of a political leader, right? That powerful figure standing at the very top of a pyramid? Well, that image is starting to look, well, really old. Today, in our super connected world, the old playbooks are getting tossed out, and a totally new model of leadership is starting to take shape.
I mean, it's a question people have been asking forever. But the answer we might have given, say, in the 20th century, it's just fundamentally different from the one that makes sense today. It feels like the ground has completely shifted under our feet.
And this slide really gets to the heart of that change. We're moving away from a model that was all about a single charismatic leader, a rigid ideology, and power that's locked up at the top. The 21st century answer is all about coordination, dialogue, and networked power. It's a completely different ballgame. So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to look at that old 20th century model and figure out why it kept failing. Then we'll dive into the new way of thinking that's popping up. We'll get into the super important difference between real authority and just plain old tyranny, and then apply all of it to the really fascinating case of Iran. And finally, we'll see what this all means for the road ahead. All right, so to really get where we're going, we first have to understand the blueprint we're leaving behind. Let's talk about that fading 20th century leader. So the old blueprint was all about centralization. Think of these tight-knit political parties whose whole goal was to get everyone marching to the beat of a single ideology. In this world, piling up power at the top wasn't a flaw, it was a feature. It was seen as the only way to win. And the leader? They were basically treated as the one person who held the truth. But here's the kicker, the critical flaw. History shows us, over and over again, that while this model might have been great at knocking down an old regime, it almost always failed at what came next, building a new, free society. It just kept leading to new kinds of authoritarianism, basically swapping one form of oppression for another. And this isn't just theory, right? The consequences are written in some of the darkest chapters of history. In Russia after the revolution, grabbing all that power led to a horrific civil war and millions dead. In China, that top-down centralized thinking caused unimaginable famines and purges. The blueprint was just tragically flawed from the get-go.
So if that old model was such a disaster, what's the alternative? Well, this new paradigm offers a totally different solution, and it's based on a whole new way of looking at power.
Yeah, the old model is a pyramid, pure and simple. The leader sits at the very top, the apex, and all power flows down from that one single point. Information moves up and commands come straight down. It's rigid, it's hierarchical, and it's simple. Now look at this. The geometry is completely different. The pyramid is gone. It's been replaced by a network. And the leader moves from the top to the absolute center. They become a hub. Their job isn't to command anymore. It's to connect and coordinate the energy flowing through this entire system. So, what does this new job actually look like day to day? Well, it means you're coordinating groups that might normally never even speak to each other. It means you're building actual systems for dialogue, not just barking orders. A leader now manages a network instead of owning a power structure. And the whole point is to build synergy, to make the whole thing way greater than the sum of its parts. Okay, but here's a really important question. What stops this new network from just collapsing back into that old, ugly pyramid? The answer is in understanding the huge difference between having authority and being an authoritarian. So the bedrock of any healthy democratic society is something called the rule of law. It's a simple idea, but it's incredibly profound. It means that everyone, and I mean everyone, including the leaders, is accountable to the law. The law isn't a weapon, it's a boundary. It limits the power of the government and protects everyone's rights. Now, contrast that with rule by law. This is what you see in authoritarian systems. Here, the law becomes a tool, a weapon that the rulers use to control everybody else. And the crucial difference is the rulers themselves stand above it. The law doesn't apply to them. That distinction, it's everything. Okay, let's take all this theory and apply it to a real-world situation that is both fascinating and incredibly complex. Iran. This is a nation with just unbelievable diversity and, sadly, a long and painful history with centralized authoritarian rule. The challenge in a place like Iran is just immense. You've got this deep, long history of authoritarianism that's clashing with a society that is incredibly diverse, ethnically, linguistically, culturally. So the goal for any future leader can't be to create unity by trying to make everyone the same. No way. It has to be about finding unity by recognizing and respecting all that diversity. So, to make this a bit more concrete, let's look at a figure like Reza Pahlavi. The source material analyzes his position using this idea of symbolic capital, and that includes things like his famous historical name, his visibility on the world stage, support from some media, and his popularity with certain groups of Iranians. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. Because while all of those things are definitely assets, the core argument here is that symbolic capital and popularity, on their own, do not make for stable leadership. In this new model, leadership isn't just a title you hold, it's a function you actually perform. And what is that function exactly? Well, it's the really hard work of building coalitions. It's actively working to lower the distrust that keeps different groups apart. It's creating real, actual ways for lots of people to participate. And maybe most importantly, it's about taking all that raw energy from social movements and channeling it into focused, effective political action. So, after all that, what's the big takeaway from this really profound shift in how we think about leadership? What does the path forward even look like? The conclusion seems pretty clear. The only leadership model that has a real shot at succeeding in our complex, modern world is one that is networked, one that is centered on dialogue, and one that is strictly bound by the rule of law, where the leaders are every bit as accountable as the citizens. And this is why it matters so much. This networked model is the only way to balance that essential need for national unity with the undeniable reality of social diversity. It builds a framework where different groups can actually work together without giving up who they are, creating a system that's strong enough to stop that slide back into the old, tired cycle of authoritarianism. So I guess we're left with this final thought. In a world full of so many different voices, is the great leader of the future really the one with the loudest voice? Or is it maybe the conductor of a choir, someone who isn't singing the song themselves, but is skillfully bringing countless different voices together to create a harmony that no single person could ever hope to achieve alone?